guys, today I'll be giving you a step-by-step tutorial on how to create your watercolor geodes. So the first thing that you'll need to get is your piece of watercolor paper. This watercolor paper can be any size, but remember you'll be making 4 watercolor geodes today. So the first thing you'll do is you will fold your paper in half, that way, and then fold your paper in half horizontally. So that way you have 4 square shapes on your piece of watercolor paper. And then each of one of those square shapes you'll be actually painting your watercolor geodes. Now remember, we're using the wet on wet method, so I suggest having 2 cups of water or 2 bowls of water near you, one for clean water and one for dirty water. And you'll be painting the shape of the geode in some sort of organic shape. Normally geodes are kind of an oval shape, but you can also make them a triangular round shape. They are organic, so just be creative with the shape that you create with the water. Again, you'll be painting with water first, and we're using the wet on wet method. So make sure that you're using watercolor paper, because watercolor paper can absorb water and it can take the heavy weight of water. Once you feel like your paper has enough water on the surface, you'll be making a choice with analogous colors. Remember, analogous colors are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, 3 specifically. So on your watercolor palette, you'll be choosing 3 to work with, as long as there are 3 that are right next to each other. So I chose like a pink color, purple, and teal or blue. So that's the first layer. Remember, when you're adding your colors, you're just kind of pushing the water around. You're not really painting like we did for our landscape. You're going to be just pushing the water around and pushing the ink around or the paint around to make it more of a tie-dye effect, because it is wet on wet, so you're just guiding the water around. You're going to be repeating these colors all the way up until you get into the center of the geode. Using the wet on wet method is something that we're trying to master here. So remember, it's important that you follow these specific directions to emulate the look of a geode. Now the very last step while you're adding your last layer of color is, while your paper is wet, this is important, your paper must be wet for this to work, you're sprinkling a little bit of salt over your artwork, and especially where it's the most wettest, and you're going to leave it alone. Now I'm going to start working on my next geode, and the next geode I chose warm colors, so I'm doing the same method again. I'm adding several layers of water to the paper, and I'm choosing the warm colors to do for my geode this time. I'm going around in a row of color, adding warm tones, first the red and then the orange and then the yellow, and working my way around the geode, making sure to just gently guide the color around. I'm not necessarily painting, but I'm just kind of gently guiding the color around the geode to make a pattern. Then the very last step, once I finish my last row, is to make sure that while the paper is wet, to add the salt. This will do the finishing touch. Now that your geodes are dry, you can kind of see that cool effect that we were going for. It does create a gem effect. For a final touch for your geodes, I ask that you create a ring around the geodes. If you take a look at geodes, they do have a pattern of sediment and minerals that settles in between each layer. And so to emulate this, our face-to-face students will be using metallic markers, and we will also be using glitter pens. That is an option for you. For my Launchpad students, you're more than welcome to purchase these items. They are really fun to work with, but they are not necessary for this project. So my face-to-face students will be using metallic markers and glitter glue, and then my Launchpad students can use marker that matches with that same area, or if you would like to purchase these extra items, you're more than welcome to. Once that step is finished, you're going to actually cut out your geodes, meaning that they're dry and ready to go. Then you're going to create a composition on a separate piece of paper, and you're going to lay out your geodes in whatever sort of fashion you'd like. You will then be tracing them very lightly with a pencil. Each of them, you have to have 4 geodes on your paper. If you want, you can name your geodes, that way you know which one goes in what spot. You can name them according to the color, or you can give them names. Have fun, be creative. Whatever you like to do. Now, once you've planned out your composition and you name your geodes, place them in a safe location for later. Now you're going to fill in that negative space around where your geode is going to be, and you're going to create organic shapes. I would like for you to get as close as possible to the actual geode shape and to the other shapes. See here, I'm making kind of like a puzzle shape. They don't necessarily touch each other, but they're close to each other, and they're not really like specific geometric shapes. They're more like organic shapes. Within those organic shapes is where you're going to include your Zentangles or your patterning designs. Remember to make them as big as possible, but not to touch each other. You will be doing this step in pencil first. Once you have your organic shapes drawn out with the pencil, you can go ahead and grab a Sharpie or an ink pen and trace them out. You can also trace out your geode shapes as well. Once you've traced them out, you're going to include the Zentangles or your patterns inside of those organic shapes. Make sure to take your time and be creative with the Zentangles. You'll have access to a Zentangle playlist. That way it gives you some ideas on what designs to specifically include in those areas. The very last step is to attach your geodes. Have fun!